excited. There we go. Hi, everybody. This is Kathy L. Murphy channeling Daisy Buchanan from The Great Gatsby, and I have one of my fantabulous friends joining me for the celebration of her life at, Gatsby's home. And we have our wonderful co-host, Robert Gwaltney, that has already got his champagne, martini glass, whatever. I've got our wonderful, bubbly, breathless wine here with us so we can celebrate these two films, because we're actually discussing tonight two films that were done, two versions of The Great Gatsby, the 1974 film starring Mia Farrow and Robert Redford, and then also the 2013 fantastical cinematography of The Great Gatsby starring, of course, Carey Mulligan and Leonardo DiCaprio. So I'm opening it up for discussion. I have watched these films throughout the years and read the books. I'm a big Fitzgerald fan. I have loved everything about him, because in the 2013 version, at the very beginning, when he's talking to the therapist, Nick Carraway, he talks about, the guy says, you need to write the story down. He goes, oh, I don't know if I can do that. And he goes, even if you just burn it, if you write the story down, you can deal with it. And I thought, that is so true in life, with everything, with people. If we would just write the stories down, even if it's just for ourselves, it helps you figure things out. I know when I wrote my first book, The Pulpit Queen's Tiara Wearing Book Sharing Guide to Life, I finished it and I go, so that's who I am. Have you found that as an author, Robert, Ruthie, when you write your books, does it help explain to you the process of the writing, that who you are and what your belief system is?
Yes, it's certainly a journey in that regard. And first, Kathy, Ruthie, you ladies look lovely.
Oh, you look lovely, darling. You look lovely.
You always, you are.
You are.
The epitome of The Great Gatsby.
Yes.
Just dressed to the nines. You would have fit very well as Nick Carraway at that party, because you were observing, you're dressed. I have to tell you, I love the story, and it's been very controversial lately, because they said it's a white privileged story. But I think it gives kind of an inside clue into why people get that belief system. And I think when we put it blaringly out there into the world where people can see it, we can kind of examine that it's a facade. It's all the fear of not being accepted into a certain world. I listen to, I know Robert always gets on and watches a lot of research videos. I watched a video on Leonardo talking about the film, and, the preconceived notions of, he didn't really actually want to go into it at first, because that's like, doing a remake or going on of Gone with the Wind. It's such a iconic book and film but I really do feel that the new version, the 2013, was one of the best entertaining films in the world. How about, the look on your face. I gotta get a picture of this. You are just the cutest thing ever.
Well, I have to answer your first question, darling. I really do, about the writing the story part. Well, I think that's very true. And I will tell you that as a psychotherapist, I give this as an assignment to people all the time. I'm
Really?
always saying, write your story. If you have a problem with your parents, write their story and decide what you want to hold on to of their story and when you want to let go of their story.
Mm-hmm.
But I just, so I do agree with that. I have to say that I hate to disagree with you. I love you dearly, Kathy.
Okay.
I love you dearly. And I was a little frightened to come into this night, because I I was very disappointed with both of the versions of the film.
Really?
They could not come close to the writing of the film. And I'm going to tell you, the writing is so exquisite. You know, Robert, darling, you've been posting these quotes, and I do hope you will read some of them to us.
Absolutely.
Will you? So
Yeah.
the last quote you did, was like the narrator, Nick, saying about Gatsby that he looked at you with these eyes that always believed in you. And I thought both versions, and I have to blame this on the screenplay. I really, really do. Because they're both wonderful actors, Robert and, Leonardo, friends of mine. Anyway, so what I have to say is that I never saw that. I never saw Gatsby care really that deeply about anybody else. And how I perceived him, from an Enneagram perspective, is that he was the 3 on the Enneagram who felt worthless and had to keep trying and trying and trying harder. And it was all about him. It was all about him. Now, I will say that the second half of the latest film, the 2013, something shifted. Did you notice that? Like, they were doing all this bizarre hip hop, out of context music in the beginning of the film. And then all of a sudden, about halfway through the film, we started to get some backstory. And when that happened, I started to go, okay, now I can care a little bit more about these characters. But really, that's just my point of view.
Well, I have to agree with you in saying that I thought Jay Gatsby was a total narcissist. I don't think he cared about anybody but himself. And his obsession with Daisy was, his own fantasy, his own fantasy. And I thought Bruce Dern, who played him in her husband in the first movie, was a very complicated character. Here he was having an affair on his beautiful, wealthy wife. They have the polo ponies, they have, everything you can possibly imagine. But I really did feel like that he cared for her and he tried to protect her. And she was just, a ditz. When she ran up to her, cousin and said, "Oh, kiss me now." I'm just like, this guy, he's totally enamored with her because she's a beautiful woman. But at the same time, she was as shallow, as
Mia played her as a little bit nuts too, didn't she? Like, she was all over the place, So I thought she was beyond a ditz. Like, she was like a crazy, neurotic, terribly afraid. At least Carey Mulligan, I thought, was, more real per se, more gracious in a way. And clearly she struggled with telling the truth, a bit, and she didn't want to lie. But I agree with you so much that he was a narcissist. But when you read that beautiful passage that Robert just posted, now, I need to know, Robert, what you think about this, because what you posted was, that, when Nick in both versions says right before Gatsby is, then he says, "Oh, you're better than all the lot of them." And I'm like going, really? Really? So, but then when you posted that beautiful section, which I just wish you would read.
Sure.
It was either that Nick himself was in a fantasy world projected onto Gatsby, could be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if he was accurate, if Gatsby made him feel that way, which in neither version did I find, even though I love Sam Waterston. He's
oh my gosh, she was perfect as far as casting. Perfect.
He was wonderful, and you cared about him, even though you didn't know shit about him. You didn't know anything about him, did you? So I loved him, but I'm dying to know, Robert, what your perception is. Do you think that they just decided Nick's narration was a distortion, or do you think that they missed the boat?
Well, I think that of course, we're talking about F. Scott Fitzgerald's 1925 great American novel that was not a success until after he passed away. It was critically well received, but it was not commercially successful at the time. There are many things in The Great Gatsby. There's the American dream, the class system, how
racism,
anti-Semitism. You've got the character Meyer Wolfsheim. There are the elements of racism that are woven through at the beginning when Tom Buchanan in the novel is actually speaking about a book that is basically a topic on white supremacy. There are also scholars who say that well, of course, from a Daisy Buchanan perspective, they're exploring gender roles and expectations, but they also perhaps are exploring sexuality, because one could argue that Nick is in love with Jay Gatsby.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up. I thought that myself.
I did too.
So it's a beautiful novel. I believe that Jay Gatz is F. Scott Fitzgerald. I think that he was writing elements of himself and elements of his own sexuality and, his own insecurities. The trajectory of his story is not unlike Jay Gatz becoming Jay Gatsby.
You can see why scholars through the years have picked this over and over for, college course adoption and different things. But we have an author who won our award for Pulpit Queen Bonus Book of the Year, Michael Ferris Smith, who has written a book. Have you seen this? You ever seen this, Ruthie? I think this is Nick, and it's a prequel. And I love the cover of this book. So for those that are Fitzgerald fans, you need to check out this book. It's a novel by Michael Ferris Smith, and Richard Russo said it's masterful, but he's gotten wonderful quotes on the book, and I'm really excited that he's in our body of International Pulpit Queens and Timber Guys Book Club authors. But there's also another author that I have fell in love with named Amor, A-M-O-R Towles, T-O-W-L-E-S. And he came into the picture, it's been several years ago, The Gentleman from Moscow. He writes like Fitzgerald. He is an observer. That's what fascinated me the most about the Nick Carraway character, is the fact that he was in the midst of all this, but he was also outside. He was looking in. And I think all of us as authors, that's what we tend to do. When I go, I'm not a big party person, but I agree with the quote from the film: the bigger the party, the more you can have your privacy. And so when you go to those, that's what I do. I listen to the conversations. And that was fascinating to me, that he was doing that and then listening in, but he was also caught up in it. And he seemed to have led, even though he went to college with Daisy's husband and everything, he seemed pretty sheltered. I mean, he said that he'd only gotten drunk 2 times in his life, and my favorite scene was all these quotes. And Daisy has some ones that I can't believe came out of her mouth, but my favorite one was this one. It's such a beautiful shirt. And stitches over these shirts, in the 2013 version where he's throwing them out of the wardrobe and they're all pressed and folded and he's got every pastel color under the sun. I was just like, oh, these are classic moments. I'm one of these people that I was a big Carol Burnett fan. So when Carol Burnett would, imitate these silent movie stars and, all the scenes from Gone with the Wind, I would always, I don't know how she did her eyes, she'd do those crazy eyes, but there's no way I could have done those false eyelashes because they would just be two little black lines. I don't know how you do that.
I tried, and they look like spiders on my eyes. Spiders. But I love what Robert just said. So about the possible homosexuality that was being an undercurrent in it, because look at Nick. He had this possibility of this golf star who wasn't, ugly as a mud fence.
Oh, she was very attractive.
In both versions.
Jordan Baker, right. And who might have been a lesbian herself.
And then Lois Childs in the first version. And she never said a word. She just sat there like, a stick. But they were beautiful. He could have had a wonderful soiree with them and whatever. And he had no interest in whatsoever in any of that. And he was so enamored with Jay Gatsby, and not taken by his money, not even taken by the possibility of Gatsby helping him get rich. He wasn't interested, but he was awful preoccupied, and he did not do a thing, so and then the question is, yes, why did Gatsby dress in pinks and very feminine colors and so forth like that too, holding Daisy as this kind of idealized woman that was the only woman for him. You didn't get a sense that he was a womanizer particularly, did you?
It was his goal in life to have her.
And then there's in the 2013 version when Tom and Myrtle are at the apartment, and women are coming on to him, and he's not interested. I love this beginning moment. They really, I think that Baz Luhrmann captured the visual aspect of the scene when you first see Daisy and Jordan Baker in the lovely room, the chandeliers, the curtains flowing, and so
that was fabulous, yeah.
And so he's telling his cousin Nick, and he said, I told her how I stopped off in Chicago for a day on my way east, and how a dozen people had sent their love through me. Do they miss me? She cried ecstatically. The whole town is desolate. All the cars have the left rear wheel painted black as a mourning wreath, and there's a persistent wail all night along the North Shore. How gorgeous. Let's go back, Tom, tomorrow. Then she added irreverently, you ought to see the baby.
Yeah.
And Chicago was not a little town back then.
No, and it's still.
And how would they remember her? I mean, I'm thinking, I've been to Chicago many times, and I can say, what does everybody think about me now that I haven't been there?
Yeah, but you have to remember that Daisy Buchanan was in all the papers. She was a socialite, so when she said they, it was certainly going to be a certain circle of people.
It was like the gossip columnist, and Jay Gatsby had the albums of all the features of her at every party she ever went to, and all the and will you put your uniform on so I can wear that dress? I'm just going, who keeps this stuff? But I'll tell you two things that surprised me after all these years of not watching it was in the 2013, I'd forgotten about those curtains. Remember when people had shears?
Yes.
My mother had them in our house. They were underneath all the draperies. And then when the windows were open, the way they would flutter, that was beautiful.
Gorgeous.
It was absolutely gorgeous. And I think the cottage, the way it was set up next to the house, there was such a difference between, and it was just still there. I thought that was amazing. But in the 2013 version, I had watched this years ago when it first came out, And I fell in love with the apartment in New York. All the beaded curtains and the wallpapered walls did you see it's from a very famous painting, the centerpieces on the couch of the Fragiani Girl in the Swing, which was, it's very scandalous painting because the thing was, back in, in the days of Louis the, whatever in that time, Rococo time frame, the story was the girl in the swing didn't have any undergarments. So then when she swung up, the man swinging her could, just little things like that I took into place in that fabulous apartment, and all that Art Deco, the jewelry, the clothes, the garish colors of those times was fascinating to me. And then the other thing that blew me away was I just recently have watched all these Bollywood films, and the man who was instrumental on helping Jay Gatsby was this, his Wolfstein, what was his name? The gambler.
Meyer Wolfsheim.
Yes, okay. That is one of the most famous actors in Bollywood. And I had not recognized that he played that role. And the fact that this huge Bollywood star was in this mega, spectacular American film, that's a big deal. I did not realize that, and I can't pronounce his name. It's very difficult for me to say in Hindi, but he was perfectly cast as this gambling guy. But I think they kind of are standalones. We can compare the two movies, but it's really like comparing 2013 with 1974. Because they're time capsules, because even though, and I look at things like costume and hairstyles, the hairstyles in The Great Gatsby were kind of like renditions of the styles of hair in 1974 when women first started going to Vidal Sassoon haircuts and tried to make them look 20s. But in the 2013, they went back to the finger waves and the really stuff. It was more authentic. And the guy Boz, who put that film together, I watched an interview. Leonardo DiCaprio said he is a stickler for creating nostalgia and the retro, much the way Mad Men was when it was made into a 60s television show. He really had the costumes and everything down in the cars. And
I cannot fault the costumes and the makeup and the sets in either of the films. I was blown away by both of them. They were beautiful. They created a world that you could enter. No, I'm more just interested in the screenplays, I think, because we have good actors. This is not
I think, as Ruth was saying, I think that it's hard to take a work like The Great Gatsby and transform it to the screen, adapt it to the screen, because the prose is just so stunning. I mean, how do you even get some of these points and these moments across on the screen?
Well, I think you go back to the beautiful work of Fitzgerald himself. That you use more of that narration, don't you think? Because if let's say that one passage, they omitted that passage about, like there should have been moments where you did see this look in the two of their eyes, or in which Nick felt buoyed up, or you didn't have those intimate moments. And then I want to ask you something else. The person that really changed him was he was out on a boat, right? And then that rich man, he saved that rich man's life. Now that was in the 2013, but not in the other one. And that was helpful because you thought, how did he get to know how to talk with that, old sports stuff. And I wonder what that relationship was like. And then that man abandoned him.
Well, there's so when F. Scott Fitzgerald was much younger, he had a great friendship with a Catholic priest. And the Catholic
this is even getting more intriguing. Okay.
The Catholic priest's last name was Hay. Well, he gives that last name to Daisy. That's her maiden name, Daisy Hay. Isn't that fascinating?
There's clues.
Make hay while the
little Easter eggs. But of course, there's lots of debate over exactly the place that was based on West Egg. I think there's a place called Long Neck, which people think is where they had stayed, which inspired The Great Gatsby. There's another place, it's called West something. I cannot remember the name of it, but most recently there was a documentary about it with Sam Waterston. Actually, it's fascinating.
Really, I'd like to know what that is.
I'll have to share that. I'll have to share that with you. I purchased it on Vudu, but it's fascinating, and they go into a great level of detail about why they think that West Egg was not based on Long Neck, but this place that F. Scott Fitzgerald and Zelda stayed at for 5 months after they had just been married. And it's a home right next to this really large mansion. That's so a lot of the descriptions are somewhat similar. There's a lot of debate about it. What's fascinating is that F. Scott Fitzgerald is in a way sort of cannibalized, as most writers do, bits and pieces of his own life, but he actually pilfered Zelda's journals and diaries. He would get bits and pieces of nuggets of things that she had said and use it in his writing. That whole line about, I hope, she's a beautiful little fool when she's talking about her daughter. Zelda actually said that about their own daughter.
Fascinating.
Frances Scotty Fitzgerald.
So did you notice that in the second movie, there was no there was the little girl, she talked about her, but you never saw the little girl, but in the first film you did.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that was important because the look on Jay Gatsby's face when the daughter comes into the picture in the 1974 is because it just kind of dawns on him that she's had a child, then she's had sex with this guy. He knows she's married to him, but he's living in this fantastical world where he's created this fantasy of her. And then he sees her, she's a mother. That was a fascinating scene, but you're right. It didn't carry through when they did the 2013. But the 2013, this was a trend that they were doing, is they were taking films and putting modern music to it, and all the the CGI and
so I think the reason, so The Great Gatsby takes place during the Jazz Age, which F. Scott Fitzgerald claimed to have coined the phrase the Jazz Age. I don't know if he did or not, but
I don't know about that.
I think what Baz Luhrmann did with the 2013 film is utilize modern music to show that, basically the music that we were listening to in the soundtrack was not dissimilar to the music that they were listening to during the Roaring 20s, during the Jazz Age.
Absolutely.
But may I ask,
pull in a younger audience too, because nobody wants to read the classics, and I don't know why, because that book, I couldn't put it down when I first read it. I was just like, I wanted to, I didn't know anything about this kind of world. Growing up in Kansas, we had people that were very wealthy, but you would never know it because they didn't live in houses like that. They didn't have opulent lifestyles like that. They just looked like us. They looked dressed the same as anybody else I went to school with. So it was fascinating to me. And I think we're always fascinated by people that are different from us when we get into stories. So, and I think it'll hold true.
I think it's so interesting what you said, because for me, you know, when I have directed a period piece, for instance, there are people, you know, like they will take many Shakespeare plays and set them into different time frames, and they hold up. Actually, they hold up. But when something is so embedded in a time, like this was, for me, it felt intrusive. It felt, why did you do that? And why did you need to do that? You know, what you do need to do is make the story relevant to any age. And of course, you know, those moments when Tom was so obviously racist and so forth in both versions,
Right.
you would take it would pan to Nick, pan to what's her name, the golf star, and then pan to Daisy, and they were like, oh God, this is the directors of both those films made a commentary that not everybody was in alignment with Tom, right? So those kind of moments are the ways that you make it relevant. But for me, it was like, I'm confused. You know, what's going? Why did, you know, Baz Luhrmann do that? I don't.
Well, I think that, I mean, the 2013 version is controversial. I mean, it's a spectacle. I think that the 1974 film comes closer to the tone of the novel, of course. It's a quieter film. And by the way, Ralph Lauren actually designed the costumes in the 1974 film, The Great
I believe
Gatsby.
it. I believe it. It was
They're
fabulous.
lovely.
Okay, you guys, Robert, maybe you know this. I don't know, but wasn't there an older film of it? There was.
So five. Now there is a silent film that
Really?
that's been lost. There's like maybe just a few moments of footage of it that F. Scott Fitzgerald and Zelda actually saw, and they hated it. There's a 1945 sort of film noir version of it with Alan Ladd, I think,
and Ruth Bussey and
Shelley Winters.
Ladd played Gatsby.
Shelley Winters, but it's very film. It's very film. It's very film noir.
Is it called The Great Gatsby?
Yeah, I believe so.
Where could I find that? I'll get on you.
I tried to find it. I could not.
And so, of course, there's the 1974 film. There's a 2000 version, and there's the 2000.
2000. Who was in the 2000?
Oh my gosh! Oh, Mina Sorvino, is that her name? Mina Sorvino.
Oh, Mira.
Sorvino, yeah.
I actually think I saw a little snippet of that on YouTube. I'll go back and watch that. Oh, and she played Daisy?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
and you know what's fascinating is that they make all the Daisies blonde, but she wasn't.
Yeah. Well, that it's just like Steel Magnolias. They always make you always think of Truvy as blonde, and she was a redhead, you know. And so where did that change? You know, when I played her in the community theater, I made her a brunette just because I didn't want to be compared to the Dolly Parton version. So I spent a lot of time on getting the 80s clothes right and the hair, and my hair was brunette, and I just thought, I'm not going to make it blonde because she was a brunette on Broadway. It was, so it was, I think the Sally Field role with the brown helmet head was correct. But we need to do that film because I could talk for days about the things that they got wrong in that film as compared to the screenplay. And I actually met Robert Harling Sr., the father of the man. I called him to invite him to come to the play. He was a lovely, lovely gentleman. He lives in Natchitoches, Louisiana, and we actually went there in character and spent the day being all the roles. We went to lunch, we went to the graveyard, we went to the, the house. It was so much fun to do that, but it was probably one of the most exhausting roles that I've ever played because I was never off, the stage, and I had to do all the hair. And people go, well, that's not hard, you're a hairdresser. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Trying to get those things to come out in perfectly with the lines that were given. Well, the last show I did, it didn't work, so I had to improvise, and I went off script. But I couldn't get the beehive back up, of the young.
All the great actors that you've ever known go off script. So you are among a good crowd that you
Well,
could
I
improvise, that you could improvise and make it real. That puts you among the best.
Well, I think if you do live theater, I think you have to be prepared to
Yes.
whatever. Yeah, you have to. But that's why the movies, they have plenty of chances to get it right, So, but the colors, the costumes, the cinematography in the new version was just blew me away just to watch it for that. But you're right, the book is always better. The book is always better. The only time I can honestly say I love the movie as much as the book was To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Because, and they cut out so much, they cut out so much of the story. A lot of people don't ever read the book and they don't know what all they miss, but there's a lot that did not make, they have to distill it down to the essence of the story. But I thought To Kill a Mockingbird was, and it's usually because the author has a significant role in the script. Before Women Had Wings by Connie Mae Fowler, she wrote the script for the Oprah Winfrey Presents movie, and it was perfect. But it's because, and she was one of my authors, and if you haven't read that book or watched that film, that would be a good one. It's tough, though. It's a tough film to watch. But
I think that what happens is that they don't care that much about maintaining the integrity of the novel, and they want to put their stamp on it, and they want to make it their version. Oh, I have this, those meetings with the director and the screenplay, and oh, let's go from this angle or that angle. And it's a shame, because if you're going to do a classic, if you're going to do something that's just an okay thing, who cares? But when you're doing such a classic, it's problematic.
Well, and you know what I think? We all read the same novel, but we all see it differently. And that really is the directorial interpretation of the film. That's why you see it differently. The novel, when Baz Luhrmann read The Great Gatsby, that's what he saw. When was it Coppola who wrote the script for the 1974 version, I believe, that's the version that they saw in their head. So we all see it slightly differently. There's this beautiful patch of praise here I want to read.
Okay.
There must have been moments, even that afternoon, when Daisy tumbled short of his dreams, not through her own fault, but because of the colossal vitality of his illusion. It had gone beyond her, beyond everything. He had thrown himself into it with a creative passion, adding to it all the time, decking it out with every bright feather that drifted his way. No amount of fire or freshness can challenge what a man will store up in his ghostly heart.
So beautiful. Beautiful.
And do you think that that's exactly what you were saying? Like she was an unattainable dream, right?
And she can never live up to that fantasy.
Never.
And another significant theme, with the love affair is that, you can't recreate a lost moment.
You can't go back, like he was always trying to go back to that time when he knew her before the war and everything. But
Nick said that, didn't Nick say that in both versions?
Yes.
He said we can't go back.
The other thing I want to bring up is the garage store owner. This guy, I don't know if I've ever seen him in any other film, but in the 1974 version, the man who played that role, I forgot he was acting. He was heartbroken. He loved this woman, and Myrtle betrayed him. And he was, even after everything that happened, it was you know, a lot of times when actors take on roles like that, they're always seen as a bad guy. You know, they can never, I always think of the guy who in Titanic, who was, you know, after our wonderful heroine with Leonardo DiCaprio and everything, the man she was engaged to, he was so awful in that film and mean and cruel, but man, was he good looking.
Billy Zane.
But he, you know, a lot of times you can't get around when they play these really bad guys. They always get cast as another character is the man who played the first husband in the Outlander series. When she, you know, the 1940s man, he was a lovely man. And then she goes back in time and he plays an ancestor and he is so evil. I can't even hardly look at that guy now because he creeps me out so much. But the guy was so, I was just heartbroken for him. And even the guy who played him in the second version, but not as much as the 1974 version. I thought that young man was
Such a tragic character.
Yes.
And it was actress Karen Black.
Yeah.
She was
her interpretation of Daisy was, I'm sorry, of Myrtle was fascinating.
Yeah,
I thought she was the best.
She was great. She and Sam Waterston to me were the thing. The only thing about the garage thing, I totally agree with you. Your heart was broken for him. But what didn't, and again, it doesn't take much more than a moment. You know, it's on this big screen. And if you just give a moment, it lands with you. So why did Myrtle marry that Nebbish? You know,
that's something we weren't ever privy to.
Never privy. Never
privy.
Didn't
even have a suit. You know, you didn't even have a suit when we got married, and I just didn't know. But she knew what she wanted.
Yes. And so the second guy, he's done a lot of work. He's done a lot of TV series, and he was in he was in something with Helen Mirren. Anyway, he at least visually, he was big and beefy, and you could see that a Myrtle might be attracted to him if he was spruced up a bit. But the first guy, I felt like I needed a moment. I needed to understand why she married him. I didn't get it.
My imagination made me believe that she was escaping abject poverty and she was just looking for anything to get out of the situations she was in her home.
He probably had a dream to own that station or a station. He probably sold her this dream, and you know, and she hitched herself to that star, and he was a stepping stone.
But her sister, you know, even the 1974 version, she didn't seem like she was coming from abject poverty. I don't know. It just seemed, I mean, maybe she did the same path as her, you know, maybe she was a lover of someone too, you know, mistress, or it was so hard to get behind some of the characters. And yes, your imagination has to fill in the gaps, but.
And I have a pretty big imagination. So, but I think both those girls were always looking to find the man who would better their lives. They might have to put up with some stuff, but like getting punched in the face.
And that is another theme of gender norms and expectations. Women had very little option. You know, Myrtle was doing the best that she could in her circumstance. Daisy Buchanan was as well, really, when you think about it. What was she to do? She was to be married. She needed to have a place in society. You know, that was her role. And ultimately, that's what and who she chooses. But
and you see in the 2013 version, you had a moment, and the moment was when she first laid eyes on Leonardo, and the mother was there. She only had one scene, that mother, and the mother on the stairs said, "Oh, look, darling, look at all these men in uniforms, and they must come from very, very fine families. And she had one line, that mother, but it stuck in your head. Oh, Daisy was programmed that
Yeah,
this is
she was. She didn't have a thought in her head, and she had no remorse about killing that woman in the films. She had no, I mean, she was like, oh, so she goes to her husband, you know, she just escapes into him and goes back to him because she couldn't deal with the fact that she plowed down and killed a woman. And I mean, I couldn't live with myself if something like that happened to me. And then Jay Gatsby taking the blame.
And she lets him. She lets him.
Horrible circumstance. But it was all the drinking, all the partying, all the opulence. And were people really happy? And that poor little girl, God knows what she would have grown up like.
Oh my God.
I was just like, if you don't want to wear this dress, you can wear any color you want, darling. And she didn't want to wear that color of dress. And I'm thinking, oh my God, there's so many kids in this world that just would love to have a dress, you know? And it's shocking in a way, but it's all the way you're raised. I mean, if you're raised in that belief system, I mean, they would just blatantly, I mean, the movie is so politically incorrect. They said, we've got to be strong as a white, you know, Nordic.
Well, and that's all code, that whole Nordic thing. I mean, that's where it's white supremacy is what they're talking about.
Absolutely. And I'm just thinking, wow, look at today. You know, they just did the, you know, the census recap. And America is multicultural, and it's the percentage is like it's been raised 215% of how mixed races we are in the United States now. We're not just a one colored people. We're a little bit of everything. And but back then, you know, why did everybody come over here in the first place and try to take over all this land? They wanted freedom from, you know, religious persecution, and they wanted to create this utopia. And there is no utopia. There is, the fact of the matter is, we all need to, as people, learn how to respect other people's differences. But we all have the same wants and needs. We all want to be loved. We want to love somebody. We want air, food, water. We want a safe environment, but we just repeat our mistakes over and over and over. And that's why if we read and we learn from these horrible situations that, oh my gosh, you know, look how far we've come. Well, we backtrack a lot too. So for those that are out there that have not read the book, you need to read The Great Gatsby.
And so, Kathy, since we're getting close to the hour, I do want to read the very end of the book.
Yes.
Okay. And as I sat there brooding on the old unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He had come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. He did not know that it was already behind him, somewhere back in the vast obscurity beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow, we will run faster, stretch our arms farther in one fine morning. This always gets me. So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. Isn't that stunning? It just makes me cry.
I have goosebumps. I have goosebumps everywhere. It was a great choice, and I'm glad that you suggested that we do both films and talk about it. And we have fun dressing up in these characters, but there's a lot of serious issues. in the discussions, and we can make it entertaining, which they did in the 2013 version. But the bottom line is we can all learn from the reading of the book, and it's all about the story. So yay. So let's announce now what we're doing next week. Robert, you were just cluing me in on the movie that we're going to be.
Yes. Says Orson Welles, The Magnificent Ambersons.
Oh boy, huh?
Oh,
This is going to be so much fun. And there's so many people that probably never seen this. Was it actually based upon a book?
Yes, it is. And the author eludes me, but I'll make sure that
We'll have it.
yes, it was adapted from a novel. I think it was called The Magnificence of the Ambersons, and they changed the film title to The Magnificent Ambersons. It was not a great commercial success, and there's a whole backstory about the editing of that film and then finishing it without Orson Welles, and he was out of the country. I think he was in Brazil filming this extravaganza documentary or something. But I love the film regardless of. I just think it's fascinating. There are just certain scenes that are just so poetic. There's this party scene, and everyone's in constant movement, and it's just spectacular.
I cannot wait. I cannot wait. So we will continue on to every Saturday night, everybody, 6:30. We're now doing it live on FaceTime. I will get on there. If you have any comments or questions and everything, we'll do everything we can to answer them. This is being recorded too, so it will be posted on our Kathy L. Murphy YouTube channel. So if you didn't get to watch Saturday night, I mean, I don't know what people are doing, but this is what I live for, being in my cabin in social distancing, and exactly why I created the Book and Film Club, because every Saturday night I'm watching all these movies and I want to discuss it. And Robert was the first to join me and had such wonderful insight and did such great research on background. And Ruthie, with all your theater background and the fact that you've done screenplays and television and Broadway, you are a part of our team forever. And so we'll continue. You may not be able to make it every time, but in the meantime, let's pop a bit of the bubbly, and let's just go to the movies, shall we? It's all about the story. So we'll see you next time, and stay tuned. Thank you for joining us, everybody, on Facebook, and dress up with us. We would love to have you. It's a lot of fun. Watch the film. It'll be all up on our calendar events on our website, www.thepulpwoodqueens.com. So ta-ta for now, everybody.
goodbye, old sport.
Good night, old
Goodbye,
sport.
darling.
I'm going to have to use that. Okay, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.